Mount Fuji is often admired as Japan's majestic symbol of beauty and culture. But in winter, it transforms into something far more unforgiving. The mountain's icy slopes, powerful winds, and unpredictable weather turn every step into a potential mistake with devastating consequences. In December 2013, a group of climbers experienced this danger firsthand in what became one of the most talked about incidents on Fuji in recent years. A fatal winter fall that not only led to tragedy, but also sparked a heated debate about rescue operations and legal responsibility. The climbers, part of an experienced mountaineering group, were practicing winter techniques on the Gotemba route. Conditions were harsh. Snow and ice made the ground treacherous, and the cold was biting. At some point during their ascent, they slipped. Because they were roped together, what might have been a single fall cascaded into a collective disaster. The climbers slid down hundreds of meters, essentially helpless against gravity and ice. Rescue teams were quickly dispatched, braving the elements to locate and extract them. 2 climbers were found in critical condition, essentially without signs of life, while others survived and were evacuated by helicopter. The physical toll was severe, but what came afterward pushed this accident into public and legal discourse. Normally, accidents on Fuji are reported as cautionary tales, reminders of the risks of climbing outside the official season and the need for adequate preparation. This incident, however, unfolded differently. The rescue operation itself was called into question. Critics argued that the climbers should not have been attempting such a dangerous climb in December at all, and that their decisions had unnecessarily endangered not just themselves, but also the rescuers tasked with saving them. Others turned their attention to the conduct of the rescue. Were the methods appropriate? Were risks miscalculated? Should responsibility extend beyond the climbers and include the rescuers or organizations involved? What began as a tragic accident soon entered the realm of legal examination, with courts later considering aspects of how the operation was managed. The controversy highlighted a broader issue that extends well beyond this single incident: the balance between individual freedom to climb and societal responsibility when things go wrong. Mount Fuji in winter is not closed, but it is widely understood to be hazardous, with conditions that demand specialized equipment and advanced experience. Yet accidents still occur regularly. Every time rescuers are called in, they put their own lives at risk, and the cost of such operations can be significant. In the 2013 case, these concerns were amplified, as it seemed the decisions of both the climbers and rescuers carried consequences that could not be ignored. The legal scrutiny served as a stark reminder that climbing accidents are not only matters of personal tragedy, but also of public responsibility and systemic reflection. In the end, the December 2013 fall on Mount Fuji stands as more than just another accident in the long list of tragedies on Japan's highest peak. It is remembered as an event that forced people to reconsider how rescue operations should be conducted, who bears responsibility when danger escalates, and how society can better manage the delicate balance between respecting human determination and ensuring safety. The mountain itself remains indifferent, a towering presence of snow and rock, but the discussions that followed this accident continue to shape the way Japan views winter climbing, rescue ethics, and legal accountability on its most iconic summit. K2 has never been kind to those who dare to challenge it. It's an unforgiving monster, swallowing even the most experienced climbers whole. But the summer of 1986 was something else entirely. A season so cursed, so cruel, that it became one of the deadliest in mountaineering history. 13 climbers from multiple expeditions perished on its icy slopes, victims of raging storms, avalanches, and sheer exhaustion. Among them were renowned mountaineers like Alan Rouse, Tadeusz Piotrowski, and Julie Tullis, each of whom met their end in ways that still haunt the climbing world. But what unfolded between August 6th and August 10th is the stuff of nightmares, a fight for survival, where the mountain showed no mercy. British climber Alan Rouse had already defied the odds by attempting K2's treacherous Northwest Ridge, a route so dangerous that even seasoned climbers backed away. After multiple failed attempts, his team decided to turn back. But Rouse, he wasn't ready to quit. Determined to stand on the summit, He joined forces with an international team: Austrians Alfred Imitzer, Willi Bauer, Hannes Weiser, Kurt Diemberger, Polish climber Dobroslawa Miodowicz-Wolf, and British mountaineer Julie Toulis. They took the more conventional Abruzzi route, knowing full well that the window for success was closing fast. But reaching the summit was only half the battle. The real danger awaited them on the way down. On August 4th, the team made their final push. It was late, far too late, when Diemberger and Toulis reached the top. Night was falling, temperatures were plummeting, and the winds were howling. Their descent turned into a desperate fight against exhaustion, but then disaster struck. Toulis fell. She managed to recover, but it was clear they weren't going to make it back quickly. The others, already drained and starving, struggled to return to Camp 4. Along the way, they found Miodowicz-Wolf collapsed in the snow, barely conscious. They forced her to her feet, urging her to descend, but there was no stopping Diemberger and Toulis. They pushed ahead, determined to summit. It would cost them dearly. By the time everyone made it back to Camp 4, a storm was roaring in. They had no food, no fuel to melt snow, and no hope of a quick escape. Then, one by one, the mountain began to claim them. On the night of August 6th, Toulis succumbed to high-altitude pulmonary edema, her lungs filling with fluid, slowly suffocating her in the thin, freezing air. She became the first fatality of what would soon become a full-scale disaster. For the remaining climbers, the storm was a death sentence. By August 10th, a small break in the weather gave them their only chance to escape, but it was too late for Alan Rouse. The once strong British climber, who had fought so hard to reach the summit, was now slipping in and out of consciousness, moaning in agony. His teammates had no choice but to leave him behind in the tent, knowing he would never wake up. Imitzer and Weiser never made it far. Both collapsed in the snow and never got up again. Miodowicz-Wolf, weakened and disoriented, lost her grip on a fixed rope and fell to her death, vanishing into the abyss below. That left only Bauer and Diemberger, their bodies wrecked by frostbite, barely clinging to life as they stumbled down the mountain. They were the only survivors. When the storm finally cleared, K2 was littered with bodies, a grim reminder of what happens when you gamble with the world's deadliest mountain. The 1986 K2 disaster remains one of the most harrowing tragedies in climbing history, a chilling tale of ambition, survival, and the merciless power of nature. Because on K2, the mountain always has the final say. The wind roared like a vengeful spirit as Kuricky stood atop Denali, the highest peak in North America. The year was 2004, and the elements seemed to howl in defiance, testing the limits of his resilience. He had done it, conquered one of the most unforgiving summits on Earth, but he could never have imagined that this moment of triumph would ignite a journey that would spiral from glory to controversy, from adulation to whispers of doubt, and ultimately to the merciless clutches of the world's deadliest mountain. By 2005, Kuricky's name was beginning to carve itself into the annals of mountaineering. One by one, the great peaks fell beneath his feet: Aconcagua, Elbrus, and Kilimanjaro. His relentless ambition was impossible to ignore. The mountaineering world took notice of this unassuming yet tenacious figure. The peaks he conquered. When he reached the summit of Oceania's Karstens Pyramid, it was clear Kuricky was destined for greatness. The momentum only grew. By 2007, his conquest of Cho Oyu and Vinson Massif secured his place among the elite. A television documentary immortalized his triumphs, launching him into the limelight. Fame followed. So did sponsors, eager to be associated with the rising star. With every ascent, his legend expanded, his status elevating beyond the cold, desolate peaks he had made his home. He became more than a climber. He became a symbol of ambition, of pushing beyond human limits. But the higher he climbed, the darker the shadows beneath him became. Doubts began to whisper through the mountaineering community. Kuricky's claims of solo alpine-style ascents without supplemental oxygen were met with scrutiny. Whispers turned into accusations. Could he really have done it alone? The revelations of his reliance on guides and fixed ropes cast a shadow over his declarations of independence. The contradictions in his accounts, particularly on Kilimanjaro, where a guide is mandatory, only fueled the skepticism. Was he the fearless soloist he claimed to be, or was there another truth lurking beneath the surface? Then came the failures, the brutal, humiliating setbacks that no amount of sponsorships or television specials could erase. Unsuccessful attempts on Everest, Annapurna, and Shishapangma tarnished his once flawless record. His decisions were questioned, his rushed schedules, his dangerous acclimatization strategies. Everything was scrutinized under the harsh, unforgiving light of public opinion. His 2009 Everest attempt ended in exhaustion and altitude sickness, forcing him to turn back in disgrace. Then, in 2012, Everest took its first real piece of him. A devastating failure on Shishapangma left him frostbitten, his body ravaged by the mountain's icy grip. 9 fingers, lost forever to the cold. The world watched, expecting this to be the end. But Kuriki was not one to yield. In 2014, he clawed his way back to success with a triumphant ascent of Broad Peak. It was meant to be his redemption. It wasn't. The years that followed were a relentless storm of missteps. Failures in 2015, 2016, and 2017 turned him into a figure of mockery. The internet was merciless. His name, once celebrated, became a subject of ridicule. The great climber, the man who had dared to challenge the sky, was now the punchline to a cruel joke. But Kuriki was not finished. Determined to reclaim his glory, he set his sights on Everest once more. This time, he would do the impossible, an ascent via the perilous southwest face, one of the most treacherous routes. No supplemental oxygen, no safety net. This would be his masterpiece, his final declaration to the world that he belonged among the legends. But legends are not made without sacrifice. On May 21, 2018, Kuriki began his ascent. The world, once captivated by his triumphs, now watched with a mixture of doubt and morbid curiosity. The jubilant explorer who had once commanded admiration was now a solitary figure against Everest's vast, indifferent expanse. His support had waned. His sponsors had abandoned him. His reputation had crumbled beneath him like an unstable ice shelf. Still, he climbed. Then fate struck, illness. It seeped into his body like a slow poison, sapping his strength, clouding his mind. He pressed on, but the mountain does not forgive weakness. At 7,400 meters, the sickness worsened. His breathing became ragged. A persistent cough racked his body, each gasp of thin air an agonizing battle. Pain burned through his chest. He knew something was wrong. Desperation clawed at him. He sent a radio message to his climbing guides at Camp 2, his voice barely more than a whisper. Help. He needed help. The guides responded immediately, fighting their way through the brutal night, the freezing darkness swallowing every step. But Everest is vast. Everest is merciless. Then, silence. The radio cut off. The guides, struggling against the mountain's relentless assault, could not find him in the dark. Time slipped away, vanishing into the howling winds. Somewhere in that frozen abyss, Kuriki, alone and battered, continued his desperate fight against the inevitable. And then, Everest took him. In the dead of night, weakened beyond the point of return, Kuriki lost his footing. He fell. Down the treacherous slope, his body battered by the very mountain he had spent his life trying to conquer. The cold seeped into his bones, the icy fingers of hypothermia tightening their grip. In those final moments, did he regret? Did he realize that Everest had never been his to conquer, that it had merely allowed him to climb, to dream, before finally demanding its price? The next day, they found him. His body lay at 7,200 meters near Camp 2. His journey, his desperate, relentless quest for redemption, had ended in the unforgiving embrace of Everest. The news rippled through Japan, through the climbing world. Shock, mourning, reflection. Some called him a hero, others whispered of arrogance, of ambition unchecked. But in the end, Kuriki's story is not merely one of triumph or failure. It is a tale of human will, of ambition that defied reason, of the unbreakable bond between man and mountain. It is a reminder that no matter how skilled, how prepared, how determined, we are all at the mercy of forces far greater than ourselves, and Everest always has the final say. Climbing Mount Fuji sounds like the ultimate bucket list adventure, the kind of thing you tell your friends about for years, complete with selfies at sunrise and dramatic clouds rolling beneath your feet. But beneath the postcards and Instagram shots, Fuji hides a pretty grim secret. It is not just Japan's most iconic mountain. It is also a place where nature reminds people who are really in charge. One of the most heartbreaking examples happened when a 29-year-old Russian climber named Anna Dubrovina tragically lost her life near the summit after being struck by a falling rock. Imagine it. You have powered through the grueling ascent, lungs burning, legs aching, your mind locked on that magical moment of standing at the top, and then out of nowhere, a rogue rock the size of a football comes crashing down like nature's very own wrecking ball. That is what makes Fuji so dangerous. It is not just the thin air, the brutal weather shifts, or the crowds of climbers jostling for space. It is the mountain itself, literally crumbling under your boots. Even small rocks, loosened by someone's step hundreds of meters higher, can gather deadly momentum. And unlike in the movies, there is no heroic dodge move that saves the day. It is pure bad luck mixed with unforgiving physics. Anna's accident shook climbers and officials alike, because if it can happen just a few hundred meters from the summit, it can happen anywhere up there. In response, authorities actually roped off parts of the summit area, like the stone wall near the crater's shrine, because everyone suddenly realized that even spots thought to be safe zones were basically potential bowling alleys for falling rocks. What makes the story sting even more is that so many climbers, especially tourists, underestimate the risks. A lot of people hit Fuji with little more than sneakers, a jacket, and some bottled water, not realizing that helmets can be as essential as hiking poles. Sure, wearing a helmet might ruin your aesthetic for that perfect summit photo, but it beats having a rock ruin your entire existence. And it is not like Anna was reckless. She was experienced in climbing with her husband, which proves this was not some rookie mistake, but a sobering reminder that even careful mountaineers are not immune to Fuji's hazards. The tragedy also sparked bigger conversations in Japan about climbing safety, because every year tens of thousands head up during the official season, often lulled into thinking Fuji is a casual hike rather than a serious alpine challenge. Between falling rocks, altitude sickness, exhaustion, and unpredictable weather that can flip from sunny to blizzard in minutes, Fuji is less a leisurely walk up a national icon and more a volcano with a grudge. The mountain does not care if you are a seasoned climber or just a tourist with a bucket list. If conditions line up wrong, accidents can strike with merciless speed. Still, what keeps people coming back is that Fuji is breathtakingly beautiful, a place that feels otherworldly, spiritual, and larger than life. For Anna Dubrovina, that dream turned into a nightmare, and her story is now part of Fuji's darker legacy, a tale that is retold not to scare people away, but to remind them that respect for nature is non-negotiable. It is sobering, but it is also a call to take climbing seriously. Bring proper gear, plan smartly, and never forget that even as Fuji gives climbers unforgettable views and life-changing moments, it also demands humility, because at the end of the day, the mountain always wins. Alison Hargreaves was no ordinary climber. She had defied the impossible, standing alone on the summit of Mount Everest, without bottled oxygen, without Sherpa support, proving to the world that she could conquer the highest peaks on her own terms. She was fearless, determined, and unshaken by the dangers that had claimed so many before her. But in August 1995, on the merciless slopes of K2, she would face a final challenge, one she would not survive. The mountain had already earned its reputation as the deadliest in the world. Its steep, unforgiving ridges had swallowed even the strongest climbers, and yet Hargreaves was undeterred. She had joined an American team in June 1995, determined to take on the 8,611-meter giant. For weeks, they fought their way up the brutal slopes, battered by wind and exhaustion, inching closer to the top. By August 13th, she and the remnants of the American team had reached Camp 4, at an altitude where the human body is slowly dying, where every breath is a struggle. They weren't alone. A Canadian-New Zealand team had also made it to Camp 4, and as they prepared for their final push, they encountered another group, a Spanish team of elite mountaineers. The summit was within reach. Just 12 more hours of climbing, just a little more suffering, and then victory. But the mountain had other plans. Peter Hillary, son of Everest legend Sir Edmund Hillary, stood at Camp 4 and looked up at the sky. Something wasn't right. The weather, which had been eerily calm for the past 4 days, was beginning to shift. The winds whispered a warning, clouds creeping in from the horizon like shadows stalking their prey. Hillary knew what was coming. He had seen this before, on other peaks, in other disasters. The mountain was setting a trap, and yet no one else seemed willing to listen. Hillary turned back, retreating down the mountain, but Allison Hargreaves and 6 others pushed on. The summit was glorious. At 6:45 p.m., Hargreaves and Spanish climber Javier Olivar reached the top, standing on the edge of the world, looking down at the endless, frozen expanse beneath them. One by one, the others followed. American Rob Slater, Spaniards Javier Escartin and Lorenzo Ortiz, and New Zealander Bruce Grant. 6 climbers stood victorious. 6 climbers felt the rush of standing atop one of the world's greatest giants. They didn't know that their time was already up. As they turned to descend, the storm struck. It came like a hammer, crashing into the mountain with the force of 1,000 avalanches. The wind roared, screaming through the ridges, lifting loose ice and snow like daggers in the air. Temperatures plummeted in an instant, freezing flesh to metal, turning breath into ice. The world disappeared into a raging white hell. Visibility was gone, the path home erased in an instant. They were trapped, exhausted, freezing, dying. Far below them, Canadian climber Jeff Lakes had made the decision to turn back before the summit, a choice that had spared him for a while. He somehow staggered down to one of the lower camps, barely alive, his body wrecked by frostbite and exposure. But it was too late. The cold had already claimed him. He would never make it home. Higher up, the storm raged through the night, and the 6 climbers simply vanished. The next morning, as the sun rose over the Karakoram, the mountain was silent. No radio calls, no movement, no signs of life. It wasn't until later that the first chilling clues emerged. 2 Spanish climbers, Pepe Garces and Lorenzo Ortiz, had managed to survive the storm by hunkering down at Camp 4. As they descended, weak from frostbite and exhaustion, they stumbled upon something half buried in the snow, a blood-stained anorak, a climbing boot, a harness. It didn't take them long to realize who they belonged to. Allison Hargreaves was gone. From their vantage point near Camp 3, they saw a lone body, motionless in the distance, half hidden in the ice. They didn't dare approach. The risk was too great, the mountain still too dangerous. But deep down, they knew the wind had taken her. Later, as the news spread, Captain Fawad Khan, a Pakistani army officer who had been working with the expedition, revealed a grim truth. He had pleaded with her, warning her not to go beyond base camp, telling her the weather was turning. "If you climb now, it will be suicidal," he had said. She had gone anyway. For Allison Hargreaves, there was never another choice. The mountains called to her, and she had always answered. She had risked everything to stand on the highest peaks, to prove she could do what others feared. And yet, in the end, Kay too had the final word. It did not matter how strong she was. It did not matter how skilled or determined. The mountain does not care. The mountain only takes. The icy wind cut through Christopher John Coolish as he stood on the slopes of Mount Everest, his 62-year-old frame bracing against the rising sun. It was May 27, 2019, and before him stretched a sight few ever witnessed, the roof of the world, bathed in golden light. This was the moment he had dreamed of. For Christopher, an American lawyer and passionate mountaineer, Everest wasn't just a mountain. It was the final piece of a lifelong journey. He wasn't here just to stand on top of the world. He was chasing the 7 summits, the elite club of climbers who had conquered the highest peak on every continent. But Everest does not give victories. It takes them. Christopher had trained for years, honing his body and mind against some of the harshest landscapes on Earth. He was no amateur. He knew the dangers of altitude, the thin air, the bone-shattering cold. His team climbed steadily, making their way through serpentine ice fields and towering ridges, the mountain momentarily kind to them. The weather held. The winds were still. It was as if Everest welcomed them forward. But Everest is never truly kind. They stopped at Camp 4, perched at a terrifying 26,000 feet, the gateway to the death zone, where oxygen is scarce, and the human body begins to die with every passing second. This was the final staging ground before the ultimate push. Oxygen tanks were checked, layers adjusted, a final deep breath. Then, the final ascent began. The climb was grueling. Every step burned. The air was razor-thin, each breath a battle. Christopher pushed through the agony, his heart hammering against his ribs, muscles screaming for relief. Then, he was there. At the summit of Everest, Christopher stood victorious. The world stretched endlessly below him. The sunrise painted the sky in hues of fire and gold. He had done it, conquered the highest peak on Earth. But Everest does not let go so easily. As they began their descent, something was wrong. Christopher felt an odd tightness in his chest. His breathing grew labored, as if he were inhaling through a straw. His hands trembled, his vision blurred. His teammates noticed immediately. Concern flashed in their eyes. They urged him forward, knowing that getting down is always more dangerous than going up. Then, without warning, Christopher collapsed. Panic surged through the group. They tried to rouse him, to force oxygen into his lungs, but the truth was undeniable. This was not altitude sickness. This was something far deadlier. Christopher had suffered a cardiac arrest. His heart had failed him, not in the safety of his home, not in a hospital bed, but on the slopes of the deadliest mountain on Earth. Everest had claimed him. There was no chance to save him. No helicopters could reach them in time, no miracle rescues at this altitude. He was gone, but in the wake of tragedy, his family found a small comfort. He died doing what he loved. He had faced the mountain, stood at the top of the world, and etched his name into history. Now, his spirit remains forever woven into Everest's icy winds, whispering through the peaks, a reminder that no matter how strong, how determined, Everest always has the final say. Mount Fuji has always been more than just a mountain. It is a national symbol, a cultural icon, and a natural wonder that draws hundreds of thousands of climbers each year. But beneath its postcard beauty lies an unforgiving reality. The mountain can be deadly, especially outside the carefully managed climbing season. In late June 2024, just days before the official season was set to begin, tragedy struck when 4 climbers lost their lives on its slopes. The incident sent shockwaves through both the mountaineering community and the general public, serving as a reminder that even familiar landscapes can turn hostile when underestimated. The most widely reported case was that of Keita Kurakami, a 38-year-old professional climber admired for his skill and bold ascents. Kurakami was no novice. He had made a name for himself in Japan and internationally for tackling difficult routes and inspiring others with his passion for the sport. Yet, on June 26th, while ascending the Yoshida Trail, he collapsed around the 8th station, high enough that the air was thin and the conditions harsh. Despite rescue efforts and being rushed to a hospital, he passed away. For many, his death was shocking, not only because of his reputation but also because it underscored how unpredictable the mountain can be, even for those with years of experience. Reports noted that Kurakami had a history of heart trouble, and it is believed that underlying health issues played a role. On the same day, authorities discovered 3 more bodies near Mount Fuji's crater in separate locations. Their identities were not immediately released, and it remains uncertain whether they were climbing together or individually. What was clear, however, is that none of them had the benefit of open huts, staffed rescue facilities, or the safety measures that come into place when the season officially begins on July 1st. These individuals had ventured into Fuji's upper reaches when the mountain was at its most dangerous, with trails still closed, weather unstable, and rescue operations limited. Japanese officials were quick to warn the public once again about the hazards of off-season climbs. Each year, some enthusiasts ignore the rules, eager to avoid the summer crowds or to test their endurance in harsher conditions. But June 2024 demonstrated the risks in the starkest possible way. The crater area, where 3 of the bodies were recovered, is treacherous even in midsummer. Snow and ice can linger, the winds are fierce, and a single misstep can prove fatal. Add the lack of medical and logistical support in the off-season, and the odds of survival drop significantly if something goes wrong. Kurakami's passing added a particularly tragic dimension because it symbolized that expertise does not make anyone invincible. For fellow climbers, it was a sobering wake-up call. Social media and climbing forums are filled with tributes, with many reflecting on how easily ambition, passion, or the simple desire to reach the summit can blind even seasoned climbers to very real dangers. His death, coupled with the 3 others, turned what was supposed to be the exciting build-up to Fuji's 2024 season into a nationwide discussion about safety, responsibility, and respect for nature. In the end, Mount Fuji stood silent and unmoved. It will continue to rise 3,776 meters above Japan, attracting dreamers, adventurers, and thrill-seekers. But the June 2024 incident remains etched in memory as a grim reminder. Fuji may be majestic and inspiring, but it demands caution. The mountain does not bend to human pride, preparation, or even expertise. Every step upward must be taken with humility, because on Fuji, beauty and danger are 2 sides of the same slope. July 27, 2023. K2, the Savage Mountain, was once again demanding blood. As the world watched, history was being made. Norwegian mountaineer Kristin Harila was on the brink of setting a record, pushing her limits to become the fastest person to conquer all 14 of the world's 8,000-meter peaks. But while she and others pursued glory, one man lay dying beneath their boots. His name was Mohammed Hassan, a Pakistani high-altitude porter. Unlike the elite climbers chasing records, Hassan was not there for fame. He wasn't a professional alpinist with sponsorship deals or state-of-the-art gear. He was a father, a husband, a man risking his life for a paycheck. Somewhere near the bottleneck, one of the most dangerous sections of K2, Hassan slipped. He tumbled off a precarious ledge, his body smashing against the unforgiving ice. When the snow settled, he was still alive, but barely. For hours, he clung to the edge of death, bleeding and broken. And as he lay there, the climbers kept moving. They stepped over him, they climbed past him. They continued their march to the summit, chasing records while a man fought for his last breath below. Footage later emerged. Shocking, damning. A group of climbers walking by his motionless body, their crampons crunching through the ice as they focused on their ascent. The images, captured by a drone, sparked outrage across the world. 2 Austrian climbers, Philipp Blamig and Wilhelm Steindl, who had abandoned their own summit bid due to dangerous conditions, later reviewed the footage. What they saw sickened them. "We saw a guy alive, lying in the traverse in the bottleneck, and people were stepping over him. There was no rescue mission." Steindl broke down in tears. Had the hunger for glory really outweighed human life? In the face of mounting criticism, Kristin Harila defended herself. She insisted that she and her team had tried to help, but the terrain was treacherous, the altitude merciless. It was impossible, she claimed, to bring him down. "He was not part of our team," she explained. "I didn't see him fall, but once we realized he was hurt, he was never left alone." The world, however, was not convinced. Questions burned through the mountaineering community. Had Hassan been abandoned? Did his life matter less because he was just a porter? Had ambition turned deadly? In the end, Hassan's fate was sealed the moment he slipped. He died where he fell, his body swallowed by the ice, another sacrifice to the deadliest mountain on Earth. The climbers? They reached the summit. The records were set, but K2 had left the world with a bitter truth. How much is a human life worth when glory is within reach? Standing at 29,032 feet above sea level, Jason Kennison felt the sting of thin air at the summit of Mount Everest. His breath came in short, white puffs, disappearing into the endless expanse of the sky. Below him, the world stretched in all directions, jagged, snow-covered peaks of the Himalayas, shimmering under the thin veil of sunlight. The moment should have been euphoric. It should have been everything he dreamed of. For Jason, this climb wasn't just about reaching the highest point on Earth. It was about defying fate itself. In 2006, a devastating car accident left him paralyzed. Doctors told him he would never walk again. That was supposed to be the end of his journey, but Jason refused to accept that fate. Against all odds, he stood, he walked, and now he conquered. His ascent was more than a mountaineering achievement. It was a statement, a final act of defiance against the impossible. He had dedicated this climb to a higher purpose, raising funds for Spinal Cord Injuries Australia, determined to inspire others to fight for their own second chances. But Everest has never been kind to those who celebrate too soon. The thin air at the summit was turning against him. A dull headache crept in, slow at first, then vicious. His breaths became shallow. Something was wrong. A wave of nausea hit him like a sledgehammer, and his vision blurred. The once stunning view twisted into a dizzying nightmare. His movements grew sluggish, uncoordinated. His body was failing him. The Sherpa guiding him, Dawa Stephen, saw it instantly. Jason was in trouble. The team rushed to help, but the mountain does not wait for second chances. They needed to get him down, fast. With painstaking effort, they guided Jason to a place known as the Balcony, a precarious resting point at 27,600 feet. But time was running out. The oxygen tanks were nearly empty. Jason's condition was worsening. The Sherpa faced an agonizing decision: stay and risk everyone's lives, or descend and come back with reinforcements. They made the only choice they could. The group left, promising to return. But Everest is a cruel and merciless beast. As they descended to Camp 4 to resupply, the winds howled with deadly force, trapping them below. The weather shifted violently, cutting off their path back to Jason. He was alone, stranded in the death zone. With no oxygen, no help, and no way out, Jason Kennison took his final breath on the unforgiving slopes of Everest. His body, now frozen in time, became part of the mountain itself, another soul claimed by the world's highest graveyard. His family mourned, but they did not regret. Jason had chased his dream to the very edge of existence, and he had won. He had conquered Everest, but Everest had claimed him in return. In October 2019, Japanese live streamer Tetsushi Ohara, known online as Tetsu, embarked on a climb up Mount Fuji, Japan's tallest and most iconic peak. Unlike most climbers who attempt Fuji during the official summer season when conditions are relatively safe, Shiohara chose late October, a time when the mountain is far more treacherous. Off-season climbing is strongly discouraged because the trails are closed, huts are locked, and snow and ice cover the paths. It is a climb that requires specialized gear, training, and careful planning. Unfortunately, Shiohara carried little more than his phone and streaming equipment, leaving him exposed to the harsh environment. He live-streamed his ascent on the Japanese video platform Nico Nico, and his broadcast initially showed a man determined but visibly struggling. Viewers could hear him comment on the freezing cold, his numb fingers, and the slippery snow beneath his feet. While he joked at times, his fatigue and discomfort were clear. His audience, watching in real time, expressed both encouragement and concern, urging him to be careful or even turn back. Yet Shiohara pressed on, despite the worsening conditions. As he neared the summit, the climb became increasingly dangerous. The livestream captured his final moments as a steep, icy slope came into view while he remarked on the treacherous footing. Then, suddenly, he slipped. The camera jolted, snow blurred across the screen, and the sound of him sliding uncontrollably down the mountain filled the broadcast. Moments later, the livestream cut out. It was a chilling and abrupt end to what had begun as an adventurous broadcast. Alarmed viewers quickly notified authorities, who launched a search and rescue operation. The next day, rescuers discovered a body near the 7th station of Mount Fuji at around 3,000 meters in altitude. It was believed to be Shiohara, though reports initially stopped short of immediate confirmation. The discovery brought a tragic close to a story that had unfolded before an online audience. The incident sparked widespread discussion in Japan and internationally. Climbing experts and authorities emphasized the dangers of attempting Mount Fuji outside of the official season, pointing out that Shiohara had been ill-prepared for the conditions. Proper winter climbing requires crampons, ice axes, insulated clothing, and extensive mountaineering experience. Attempting such a climb with inadequate gear while simultaneously distracted by live streaming dramatically increased the risk of disaster. There was also broader reflection on the culture of live streaming itself. Some observers questioned whether the pursuit of content and online attention can push individuals into unnecessary risks. Others were struck by the unsettling reality of watching someone's final moments unfold in real time. A reminder of how technology has blurred the boundary between private tragedy and public spectacle. Reports also surfaced suggesting that Shiohara had previously battled serious illness, possibly stage 4 cancer, though this was never officially confirmed. This detail, if true, painted his climb in a more complex light, less as a reckless stunt and more as a deeply personal journey that ended in tragedy. Ultimately, the story of Tetsu Shiohara is a sobering reminder of both the beauty and the danger of mountains like Fuji. The mountain has always demanded respect, preparation, and humility from those who attempt it. Nature does not bend to human ambition or digital audiences. It remains unforgiving to those who underestimate it. Shiohara's live stream, watched by many, ended not as a tale of triumph, but as a cautionary reminder of the fine line between adventure and risk. His story continues to echo as both a tragedy and a lesson about the responsibilities that come with modern forms of storytelling. February 5th, 2021. K2, the Savage Mountain, had already taken countless lives, but this time it was different. This time, 3 of the world's most experienced climbers had set out to do the impossible: conquer K2 in the dead of winter without supplemental oxygen. It was a challenge so dangerous, so unforgiving, that many believed it was suicide. Yet Ali Sadpara, John Snorri, and Juan Pablo Moore refused to back down. They had spent their lives pushing the limits, staring death in the face and coming out victorious. But K2 does not care about records. It does not care about experience. As they made their way up the mountain, the temperature plunged to minus 60 degrees Celsius. The wind howled like a living beast, threatening to rip them from the mountainside with every step. The air was razor thin, every breath a battle, but they pushed forward, determined to etch their names into history. Then, at the bottleneck, K2's deadliest passage, where towering ice seracs loomed like frozen guillotines above them, everything changed. Sajid Sadpara, Ali's son, had been climbing alongside them, but as they neared the death zone, altitude sickness hit him hard. His father urged him to use oxygen from an emergency kit, but when the equipment failed, Sajid had no choice but to turn back. It was the last time he would ever see them alive. Sajid waited at Camp 3, watching the minutes turn into hours, the hours into an endless night. He expected to see their silhouettes emerging from the storm at any moment, but they never came. By morning, panic turned to horror. Something had gone terribly wrong. His father, his hero, was missing. A desperate search was launched. Helicopters flew to 7,000 meters, scanning the unforgiving slopes for any sign of life. The mountain was silent. There was no movement, no signal, nothing. As hours turned into days, hope faded. In the death zone, where oxygen is too thin to sustain life, survival was impossible. The world mourned. 3 of the most fearless climbers had vanished, swallowed by the mountain. But Sajid refused to let K2 keep his father's story unfinished. For months, he searched, he climbed, he dug, he begged the mountain to return them. Then, in July, as the snow began to thaw, K2 revealed its cruel secret. The bodies of Ali Saidpara, John Snorri, and Juan Pablo Moore were found hanging lifelessly by their safety ropes near the bottleneck. They had come so close. There was no way to bring them down, no way to give them the burial they deserved. Instead, they were laid to rest in the ice, forever a part of the mountain they had fought so hard to conquer. Ali Saidpara's legacy would not end there. His name would be spoken with reverence by climbers across the world. His son would continue his journey, carrying forward his father's spirit. But K2 had won again, because in the end, no one conquers Savage Mountain. It only allows you to leave, if it chooses. The frigid winds howled like ghosts through the jagged peaks of Mount Everest. Gimi Tenji Sherpa stood on the icy slopes of the Khumbu Icefall, the weight of his pack pressing heavily against him. But his face, weathered, strong, unreadable, betrayed no sign of strain. He had done this before. At 38 years old, Gimi was no ordinary climber. A veteran Sherpa, he had conquered Everest multiple times, guiding others to the summit, ensuring their survival while risking his own life with every ascent. The Himalayas were his home, their dangers as familiar to him as breathing. But Everest does not care how many times you've bested it. It was April 14th, 2022. Another expedition, another climb. His mission was routine: carry supplies to Camp 2. Alongside a dozen other Sherpas from international mountain guides, he moved through the deadly Khumbu Icefall with practiced precision. The football field, a relatively stable section of the icefall at 17,999 feet, lay ahead. Compared to the chaotic maze of shifting seracs and deep crevasses elsewhere, this stretch was a momentary reprieve. But Everest does not give reprieves. Somewhere along the ascent, it happened. A sudden wave of nausea crashed over him. His chest tightened. His breath, once steady, controlled, turned shallow and ragged. Panic crept in. Something was wrong. He pressed forward, willing his body to obey. He had done this 100 times. But his vision blurred. His legs wobbled beneath him. The weight of his pack felt unbearable. Though he had carried heavier loads before, his body was failing him. Desperate, Nima stopped. He turned, searching for his fellow climbers, but saw no one. He was alone. The nausea grew worse. His breathing became erratic. The mountain spun around him. He tried to push on, but his body rebelled. His only option now was to wait. He sank to the ice, still strapped into his pack, hoping a few moments of rest would restore his strength. They didn't. The cold crept in. His vision dimmed, his fingers numbed. The howling wind drowned out everything but the faint, distant beat of his failing heart. Then silence. When they found him at 4 a.m., he was still sitting upright, his backpack secured tightly to his body. His face was peaceful, as if he had simply closed his eyes and drifted away. But Everest had claimed another. No signs of a fall, no avalanches, no trauma, only the silent killer, high-altitude sickness. It was cruel irony. A Sherpa, a guardian of the mountain, taken by the very force he had spent his life mastering. A third of all deaths on Everest belonged to Nepali guides and porters, the unsung heroes who carry the weight of others' dreams, often at the cost of their own lives. And Nyingma Teni Sherpa was now among them. His story was not just another statistic. It was a warning, a reminder that Everest, for all its allure, is not a prize to be won. It is a force to be survived. In December 1992, Mount Fuji decided to remind everyone why winter climbing is not for the faint-hearted. The iconic volcano may look calm and majestic from a distance, but up close in the middle of winter, it turns into an icy death trap. That year, a group of climbers attempted a winter ascent, and what started as a bold adventure soon spiraled into one of the most infamous accidents in Fuji's history. The climbers were roped together, which was supposed to make them safer. The logic is simple. If one person slips, the others can hold them steady. But in reality, on an unforgiving sheet of ice, that same rope can become a curse. When one climber lost footing, the icy slope turned their stumble into a full-blown chain reaction. Within moments, the group was dragged down together in what has since been described as a mass fall. It was brutal, fast, and unstoppable. The winds were howling, the slope was unforgiving, and the climbers had no chance of recovering once momentum took over. Several lives were lost that day, and the tragedy instantly etched itself into Japan's mountain lore. The accident became a kind of cautionary tale for climbers everywhere. In the years since, the 1992 fall has been reconstructed in animated safety videos shown on Japanese television and later found online. These reconstructions might look simple, even cartoonish, but the story they tell is chilling. They highlight how easily a small slip can snowball into disaster when conditions are extreme and preparation falls short. Fuji in December is nothing like the Fuji of summer, when tourists hike up in sneakers and snap selfies at the summit. Winter, Fuji is a different beast with icy ridges, high winds, and temperatures that cut like knives. In those conditions, even the most experienced climbers tread carefully. The 1992 group, unfortunately, was not prepared for what they were up against. Reports suggest that equipment was lacking, footing was unstable, and the decision to climb roped together on slick ice left no room for error. Once the fall began, it was no longer a climb, but a helpless slide toward tragedy. Looking back, the 1992 accident has been dissected endlessly in safety lectures, mountaineering clubs, and educational programs. The key takeaway is always the same. Winter mountaineering is about respect for the mountain. The rope, that was meant to symbolize teamwork, became a cruel reminder that sometimes the very tools we trust can betray us under the wrong circumstances. Climbers today are taught to keep spacing, check conditions religiously, and know when to turn back. The animated videos that retell the fall might seem dramatic, but they serve a real purpose. They strip away the romanticism of climbing and lay bare the consequences of misjudging Fuji's winter temperament. For Japan, the story remains a haunting example of how easily human ambition can clash with nature's indifference. What makes this tragedy stand out even decades later is how vividly it has been remembered. Many mountain accidents fade into statistics, but the 1992 fall stuck because it showed a group dynamic unraveling in real time. One slip, one gust of wind, one misstep, those were all it took to drag multiple lives down the icy slope. There is a kind of grim poetry to it. The rope meant for unity, binding them together in disaster. The fact that the accident has been animated and reanalyzed repeatedly keeps it alive in public memory, ensuring that new generations of climbers think twice before underestimating Winter Fuji. While tragic, the legacy of 1992 is not just about loss, it is also about awareness. It reminds climbers that mountains are not conquered, they are respected. And for anyone daring to face Fuji in the grip of December, that lesson might very well be the difference between a successful climb and becoming part of the mountain's long, chilling history. August 1st, 2008. A day that would go down in history as one of the darkest moments on K2, the savage mountain that has claimed more lives than almost any other peak on Earth. It started as a day of triumph, a day where dreams were within reach. It ended in horror. The ascent had been brutal, as it always is on K2. The air was thin, every breath a struggle. The death zone, above 8,000 meters, was a place where the human body is slowly shutting down, where survival is measured in mere hours. Yet, against all odds, several international teams were making their final push, inching toward the summit, determined to claim victory over the deadliest mountain in the world. They had made it through the bottleneck, a section so steep and narrow that one wrong step means certain death. But no one knew that high above them, an unseen killer lurked, one that would unleash devastation within moments. At 4:30 p.m., just as climbers were beginning their descent, it happened. A massive serac, an overhanging column of ice, towering like a frozen giant above the mountain, collapsed. Without warning, a cascade of ice and rock thundered down the bottleneck, obliterating everything in its path. In seconds, the fixed ropes, their only lifeline back down, were gone. The climbers were now stranded at over 8,200 meters, trapped in the death zone with no clear way down. panic set in. The sun was setting. The temperature was dropping. The storm clouds were moving in. There was no time to waste. Some climbers made the desperate decision to descend without ropes, gambling their lives on sheer instinct. Some fell to their deaths within moments. Others, disoriented and exhausted, collapsed in the snow, their bodies freezing in place. One by one, the mountain began to claim them. Some climbers tried to help their fallen teammates, but there was only so much they could do when death was tightening its grip on them too. Italian climber Marco Confortola and Dutch mountaineer Wilco van Rooyen fought their way downward, determined to escape K2's grasp. Van Rooyen became lost for over 36 hours in the death zone, suffering severe frostbite, hallucinating as the thin air and extreme cold began eating away at his mind. Serbian climber Dren Mandis had been among the first to perish. His death triggered a chain reaction of catastrophe, as climbers attempting to assist him were caught in the collapse. Pakistani high-altitude porter Jahan Baig was one of them. He fell to his death, screaming as he disappeared into the abyss. Norwegian climber Rolf Bay, caught in an ice collapse, stood no chance against the mountain's fury. His body was never found. Others held on as long as they could, hoping against hope that rescue would come. But there was no rescue, not this high, not in this storm. For 48 hours, the mountain showed no mercy. A total of 11 climbers from France, Ireland, Norway, Pakistan, South Korea, and Serbia lost their lives. When the storm finally cleared, K2 was silent. The mountain, as always, had taken what it wanted. For the survivors, the descent was a nightmare. They staggered down in a daze, frostbitten, broken, haunted. Some of them barely made it back alive, carried down by sheer willpower. They had conquered the mountain, but at what cost? K2 does not care how strong you are, how experienced, how determined. It does not care how much you dream. It only takes. The crisp, merciless air sliced through Peter Schwartz's senses as he jolted awake on May 24, 2023. But this wasn't Vancouver. This wasn't the warmth of his home. This was Camp 4, perched at a staggering 26,247 feet on the icy slopes of Mount Everest. Peter was in the heart of the death zone, where the air is too thin to sustain life. His breaths were short, ragged. A headache pounded against his skull. A wave of nausea twisted in his stomach. Something was wrong. At 63 years old, Peter wasn't just any climber. A respected anesthesiologist at UBC and Vancouver General Hospital, he had spent his life navigating the fine line between life and death. But here, on Everest, the odds were different. This was his dream, a lifelong pursuit fueled by a relentless spirit. He had trained, he had prepared, he had made it this far, and now the summit was within reach. But Everest doesn't care about dreams. The mountain whispers warnings in the wind, subtle at first, a pounding skull, a tightening chest, a creeping dizziness. These are the first signs, the mountain's way of testing your resolve, luring you forward even as it tightens its grip. Peter had a choice. He could push on, chase his dream, or listen to the warning signs clawing at his body. With the howling winds as his only witness, he made the call. He would descend. It was the right decision, but it would not save him. The journey down was just as treacherous as the climb up. Every step became heavier. The mountain fought back. The winds lashed against his body. The icy slopes turned treacherous beneath his feet. He aimed for Camp 2, where a helicopter waited to take him to safety. But first, he had to reach Camp 3. As he staggered downward, his body began to betray him. His legs weakened. His breaths grew erratic. The nausea worsened. Every step was a battle. His once steady pace became unsteady, sluggish. His vision blurred. The mountain was pulling him under. Still, he pushed forward. Camp 3 was close. So close. But Everest had already made its decision. Darkness crept in. His vision dimmed. His body refused to go any further. And then, nothing. The brutal cold wrapped around him like a final embrace. His weary eyes locked on the short distance to Camp 3, but his body would never make it. The altitude sickness had won. Everest had claimed another. Peter Schwartz collapsed, his breath stolen by the mountain. His heart, weakened by the relentless altitude, gave out in the silent, frozen abyss. His body remained on the eroded slopes, yet another fallen climber in Everest's vast, icy graveyard. Back home, his loved ones grieved, but not with regret. He had lived fully, fearlessly, relentlessly. He had faced Everest head-on, knowing the risk, knowing the cost. His journey ended in the mountain's grasp, but his legacy remained unbroken, a testament to the unstoppable human spirit that dares to reach for the impossible. Because on Everest, not all victories mean survival.